Welcome to Silent Queen's Rise. Now let's dive right into today's story. Lorelei Ashford stood in the parking lot of the restaurant she had built from a single borrowed folding table at a farmer's market 12 years ago, watching through the floor-to-ceiling glass as her husband of 9 years slow danced with his 26-year-old sous chef to the music Lorelei herself had selected for the staff holiday party. Damien's hand was pressed flat against the small of Cassandra's back, fingers spread wide and possessive. The way he used to hold Lorelei before ambition and contempt quietly replaced everything that had once looked like love. Lorelei was wearing her cream wool coat. The one Damien told her made her look like a middle school art teacher. Her heels were sinking into a thin film of ice that had glazed the parking lot since sundown. She had stepped outside 20 minutes ago to take a call from her executive chef about a produce delivery crisis, and when she came back to the door, she found it locked. Not malfunctioning. Not accidentally latched. Locked. With a keypad code she didn't recognize. She had stood there for a moment, her hand flat against the cold glass door, watching the party continue inside without her. She watched Damien accept a glass of champagne from a tray. She watched him laugh, loud and unguarded, the way he only ever laughed when he thought she wasn't watching. She watched Cassandra tuck herself under his arm, as if she had been living there for years. Because she had been. Lorelei just hadn't known how long. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers were pale from the cold, and the screen took 3 attempts to register her fingerprint. She didn't call the restaurant's main line. She didn't text her manager to come unlock the door. She stood in the dark of that parking lot, the distant sound of her own carefully curated playlist thumping through the glass, and she opened a contact she hadn't touched in 14 months. The name at the top of the encrypted folder read simply, Whitaker. She pressed call. It rang once. Lorelei, said the voice on the other end. Quiet. Immediate. The kind of attention that required no warm-up. Your location beacon moved outside the primary property 6 minutes ago. Are you safe? I'm in the parking lot, she said. Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. Damien changed the door code. I'm locked out of my own restaurant. A beat of silence that was not surprise so much as the sound of a very precise mind shifting gears. Give me 90 seconds, Whitaker said. Her name was Daphne Whitaker, and she was not a fixer in the Hollywood sense of the word. She was a corporate attorney, former federal prosecutor, and the woman who had quietly structured the legal architecture of everything Lorelei Ashford had built over the past decade. When Lorelei's father passed away and left her a modest inheritance that she refused to touch out of grief and stubbornness, Daphne had been the one to say, "Let me show you what this looks like in 10 years, if we're smart about it." They had been smart. Spectacularly, quietly, invisibly smart. To understand why Damien Ashford had made the most catastrophic error of his life tonight, one first had to understand what Damien believed about his wife. He believed she was talented but lucky. He believed the restaurant succeeded because of the location he had scouted, the investors he had charmed at dinner parties, the name recognition of the neighborhood. He believed Lorelei was the creative center of the operation, which in his estimation meant she was the heart and he was the brain. He had said this once, at a dinner with colleagues, and laughed when he said it, and Lorelei had smiled and reached for her wine, and said nothing at all. He did not know that the building Ardor, their restaurant, his crowning social achievement, the place he brought clients and colleagues to perform his own generosity, did not belong to him in any legal sense. He did not know that 3 years ago, when a real estate group had approached them about purchasing the building outright, Damien had fumbled the due diligence and nearly let it slip through their hands. Lorelei had quietly stepped in, routing the purchase through a holding company called Ember and Reed LLC, which was registered in Delaware and managed entirely by Daphne Whitaker's firm. Damien had seen the closing documents and signed what he was given. He had never asked whose name was on the LLC. He did not know that the silent investor he had spent years calling, a legacy donor from the Midwest, was a real estate trust. Lorelei had seated herself with money she had never told him about. Money that predated their marriage. Money her grandmother had left her in a secondary account at a bank in Vermont. An account Lorelei had kept in her maiden name, at her grandmother's explicit instruction. Because her grandmother had grown up watching women disappear into marriages, and she had wanted one Ashford woman to have a door she could always open from the inside. Damien had called Lorelei's grandmother eccentric. He had said this at the funeral, as a compliment. Lorelei had pressed her lips together and looked at the casket. She had grown up watching her grandmother be dismissed. She had married a man who dismissed her more gracefully, with better vocabulary and a warmer smile, which somehow made it worse. For 9 years, she had told herself it was a fair partnership. He handled the front-of-house relationships, the vendor negotiations, the liquor license renewals. She handled the food, the staff, the soul of the place. She had told herself his condescension was stress. She had told herself the late nights were work. She had told herself that love looked different after a decade, and she simply needed to adjust her expectations. She stopped telling herself things the Tuesday she came home early from a catering consultation and found Cassandra's earrings on the bathroom shelf. Not hidden, just sitting there, like they belonged. When she confronted Damien, he had not apologized. He had tilted his head and looked at her with something close to impatience and said, "Lorelei, you knew who I was when you married me. You're not naive. Don't perform betrayal." She had walked out of the kitchen, gone upstairs, and sat on the edge of the bed for a very long time. Then she had called Daphne. That was 14 months ago. She had not said a word to Damien since that Tuesday that wasn't perfectly ordinary. She had passed him the coffee. She had attended the vendor meetings. She had smiled at the right moments during the holiday party planning sessions, including when Cassandra presented her ideas for the centerpieces, and Damien said, enthusiastically, that Cassandra had a real instinct for this. Lorelei had agreed. She had made a note about the centerpieces. She had gone home and called Daphne. For 14 months, Daphne Whitaker had been quietly, methodically, legally dismantling Damien Ashford's claim to anything that mattered. Standing in the freezing parking lot, Lorelei felt her phone buzz once. A text from Daphne. "Everything's ready. Say the word." The door behind her clicked open from the inside. She turned. One of her line cooks, a quiet young man named Felix, who had been with her since year 2, was holding it open with his shoulder. He looked confused and faintly alarmed, the way people looked when they opened a door and found something unexpected. "Chef Lorelei," he said, "why are you out here? Mr. Ashford said you left early." "I stepped out to take a call," Lorelei said, walking past him into the warmth. He must have gotten confused. She moved through the kitchen without stopping, without making eye contact with the prep staff, who parted instinctively around her the way they always did. Because a kitchen has its own hierarchy, and Lorelei Ashford was its unquestioned apex. She pushed through the swinging door into the dining room. The party was mid-swing. 40 employees, a few investors, some local food writers. Someone had dimmed the lights to exactly the setting Lorelei had specified in the event notes. The playlist had cycled to the second hour. The food was perfect because her kitchen made perfect food. Damien saw her from across the room. Something shifted in his face. Not guilt, not yet. More like the mild irritation of a man whose plan encountered a wrinkle. Cassandra, who was standing beside him with a glass of wine and a strapless black dress that made several people in the room uncomfortable with its ambition, went very still. Lorelei walked to the bar. She ordered sparkling water with a slice of lemon. She thanked the bartender by name. She turned around and looked at the room she had built, at the exposed bricks she had sourced, at the pendant lights she had chosen after 3 weeks of searching, at the menu she had written by hand on a legal pad at her kitchen table 9 years ago. When this was all still a dream that Damien had told her was probably too ambitious for this neighborhood. She gave herself exactly 30 seconds to feel it. The grief of it, the weight of 9 years. Then she took out her phone and typed one word to Daphne. "Begin." What happened next did not look like anything dramatic, which was exactly the point. Real power, Lorelei's grandmother had told her once, doesn't announce itself. It arrives after everything is already done. At 9:47 p.m., Damien's personal cell phone stopped receiving email. The device was still in his pocket, undisturbed, and he wouldn't notice for another hour. But the administrative access he held as a co-signatory on the Ardor business accounts had been quietly revoked by the primary account holder, Ember and Reed LLC, effective immediately, on the grounds that a formal separation filing had been submitted to the Cook County Family Court that afternoon. His digital signature was removed. His login credentials expired. Every system he could reach through the restaurant's internal network went dark for him and lit up red for Daphne's team. At 9:52 p.m., a courier arrived at the front entrance of Ardor. He asked for Damien Ashford by name. One of the hosts brought Damien to the door, where the courier handed him a sealed manila envelope with a return address from Whitaker Legal Associates. Lorelei watched from across the room. She saw Damien open the envelope. She saw the color change in his face as he read the first page. It was a particular kind of pale. The pale of a man who has just realized the architecture of his life was designed by someone else, and that someone else has decided to stop maintaining it. The documents inside were a legal separation filing, an injunction preventing the sale or transfer of any Ardor associated assets, a formal notice revoking his co-signatory status on all accounts, and a summary from Ember and Reed LLC confirming that his contractual role as operations partner was terminated for cause following a documented pattern of unauthorized financial decisions and conduct unbecoming a fiduciary partner. The last page was a property deed. It showed that the building at 1412 North Halsted Street, the building that housed Ardor, was registered solely to Ember and Reed LLC. Damien's name appeared nowhere on it. It had never appeared on it. Lorelei saw him look up from the documents. He scanned the room until he found her. She was standing by the bar, her sparkling water in her hand, watching him with an expression he had never seen on her face before. It was not anger. It was not hurt. It was the particular stillness of a woman who has already made every decision that matters and is now simply watching them take effect. He crossed the room toward her. She could see the effort it cost him to keep his face controlled, to not let the 39 people in this room see Julian Damien Ashford coming undone. "What is this?" he said quietly, the envelope in his hand. "Legal documents?" Lorelei said. "Daphne's contact information is on the cover letter if you have questions. You filed for separation this afternoon." Damien stared at her. His jaw moved slightly. "You're doing this here, in front of everyone. You changed the door code," Lorelei said. "You let me stand in the parking lot in January. I thought tonight was as good a time as any." "You'll lose everything," he said. His voice had dropped to something that was trying to be threatening and landing closer to desperate. "Without me managing the investor relationships, this place collapses in 6 months. You know nothing about the business side." Lorelei set her glass down on the bar. "Damien," she said, and her voice was so quiet that he had to lean forward to hear her. "I own the building. I am the primary account holder on every operating account. The investors you have been managing for 3 years are managed through an LLC that I control. Your access was a courtesy I extended because I believed in our partnership." She paused. "I stopped believing in it 14 months ago." The blood left his face with remarkable efficiency. "The building," he started, "is mine," she said. "The investors have already been notified. Daphne sent letters this morning." He looked down at the envelope. He looked back at her. Something behind his eyes was working very hard, cycling through years of interactions, years of assumptions, trying to find the seam in the story, the place where he had misunderstood. But there was no seam. There was no misunderstanding. He had simply never bothered to look closely enough at the woman standing across from him at breakfast every morning to notice that she was someone he had entirely failed to know. "Cassandra," he said, and it came out like a reflex, like a man reaching for something to hold on to. "Cassandra was terminated from her sous chef position 40 minutes ago," Lorelei said. "Conduct unbecoming a staff member in a documented relationship with an operations partner is a terminable offense under our HR policy. Her final check is being processed tonight. She'll receive it by mail." Damien turned to look for Cassandra across the room. She was already being approached by Lorelei's general manager, Rosario, who was speaking to her in a low voice near the coat check. Cassandra's face was performing several emotions simultaneously. She looked at Damien. He looked at her. Something passed between them, the particular look shared between two people who have just realized they are not each other's solution. "Where am I supposed to go?" Damien said. The pretense of composure had given up entirely now. His voice had the raw, hollow quality of someone standing in a space where the floor used to be. "The house is in my name," Lorelei said. "It was purchased with proceeds from the Ember and Reed account. Daphne's letter outlines a 60-day transition period, during which you may collect your personal belongings. There is a hotel reservation in your name at the Marriott on Michigan Avenue for tonight. It's a good hotel. You'll be comfortable." She had not planned to be cruel. She had spent 14 months specifically engineering an outcome that was clean and legal and completely devoid of drama. But standing here now, in the room she had built, wearing the coat he had mocked, she found that she wanted him to understand one specific thing before she walked away. "You told me once," she said, "that I was the heart of this place and you were the brain." She picked up her glass. "Damien, I funded the build-out. I negotiated the lease. I sourced the investors. I own the building. What exactly did you think the brain was doing?" She didn't wait for an answer. She set her glass on the bar and walked back into her kitchen, through the swinging door, into the heat and noise and organized chaos of the place she had made from nothing. Felix looked up from the pass. Rosario appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later and gave her a small nod. Two of the line cooks exchanged a glance that contained, if Lorelei read it correctly, a very satisfying amount of quiet satisfaction. She stood at the pass for a long time. She listened to the sounds of the kitchen, the hiss of the sauté pans, the low percussion of someone breaking down a service, the ordinary, grounding, beautiful noise of work continuing because work always continues. Behind her, through the swinging door, she could hear the party beginning to understand that something had happened. Voices dropping, the music still playing, her playlist, her choices. She heard the front door open and close. She did not look. Rosario came to stand beside her, quiet for a moment. "He's gone," she said finally. Lorelei nodded. "Cassandra, too." Lorelei nodded again. "You okay?" Rosario asked. Lorelei thought about 9 years. She thought about the parking lot, and the locked door, and the cold, and the way the heat felt when Felix held it open. And the party went on without its host, knowing she had spent that time not weeping, not panicking, not calculating the fastest route back to helplessness, but standing in the dark, making one phone call to the woman who had helped her build the exit, long before she was ready to walk through it. She thought about her grandmother's voice, the way she always said, "A door you can open from the inside is worth more than a house built by someone else." "Yeah," Lorelei said. "I'm okay." She pulled her chef's coat from the hook by the pass. She put it on. She buttoned it from the bottom up, the way her first culinary instructor had taught her, a long time ago in a different life, before she knew what it cost to build something real. The kitchen was warm. The orders were still coming. The work was hers. She stepped up to the pass and called the next plate.